Live.
We're live. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, my fellow Americans. It is with great pleasure I come back to you online and live in the flesh, fellas and ladies. And I'm very excited to be here with you. I think everybody needs like a half hour, 45-minute break. We agree of tonight's news following. So this is a good opportunity. And I'm very excited to talk about this specific topic that we have tonight, because this is something I think that really pertains to the American condition. And since tonight on people's minds is what the country is going to look like, no matter who wins, no matter what happens forward, I think it's really exciting to talk about what's going to happen with us, but more importantly, how to gauge what kind of future we're going to be developing. So tonight we're going to begin a series, a 6-week series on the topic of success. How to define success, what success is, and what success is not. These are important ideas. As you'll see, knowing what success is allows you to follow that path and that range and to figure out how you could be more successful. So this week, we're going to talk about the definition of success from, of course, a Jewish perspective. And in the following weeks, we'll talk about tools of how to put yourself in position to be successful. And most importantly, by adding tools to be successful as a human being, you'll have the potential to be successful in not only for your personal life, but for those all around you. And even more importantly, actually make an impact in the larger scheme of living on earth. When you look in the dictionary in the word success and what success means, one of the things that pop up is achieving wealth, respect, or fame. These are versions of success. But if you read a little more, it says desired results of an attempt. I attempted something and I was successful. But since we're talking about what success is, we need to be able to identify how success truly matters. If it's just about results, then how come when people have good results, they're not that excited, it doesn't last forever? I think the word success indicates that when people want to be a successful person, they're thinking about a stable long-term form of joy and a stable long-term form of excitement in life. So it's very important to learn how to define success as more than just something that you achieve or the results of something. Because if it's just the results of who you are, then what you're really left with, simply put, is I can only be successful as a human being, in other words, complacent with the kind of person I am, if I have all the tools needed to be successful. But what happens when you don't have what you need? When we had the discussion about happiness, one of the things that came out was the difference between happiness as a status versus happiness as something that is a result-based is the difference in everything. Because if you're only happy when things are, quote, work out, the results are in your favor, then what happens when they're not in your favor? Sometimes you work for weeks on one idea waiting for it to be successful. And until that happens, you can't find joy, you can't find peace, you can't find happiness for yourself. So clearly, we have to look at success and joy in terms that involve our day-to-day life and day-to-day activity. And specifically when it comes to success, I think it's even more difficult than joy. See, when it comes to happiness, we have the conversation of make a choice to be happy and be happy all day, smile to people, get in good conversations, and stick to the theme of joy and find it in your life. All right, it's one conversation. But when it comes to success, we're so used to quantifying it by results. What we're left with is the inability to find it if those results aren't there. And when a person doesn't feel successful, unfortunately, they feel useless. But us Jews believe every person is not just important, but every person plays a unique role in making this world a better place. In Judaism, your vote counts. Absolutely and unequivocally. So if that's the case, and not just in the collective terms, but your individual choices matter, then knowing that you're on the path towards success can bring quite the beauty and peace to your life. So that's what we're going to focus on. In order to get ourselves in the zone to think about success and to really work on the concept of success, I'd like to ask you to write down 3 things that you would like to be successful. And over the next 6 weeks, hopefully with the tools and ideas that we will present here, when you go back to these in 6 weeks, you will really have the possibility to say, am I putting myself in position to be successful in these things? So take time to think about, let me give you some ideas, whether it's family relationships or friend relationships or relationships at all that you feel like you're unsuccessful in. Maybe it's a career path that you feel unsuccessful in. How do I know I'm on the right path for my career? Could be one. What about character flaws? Being lazy, angry, selfish. There are many things to talk about, but most importantly, people want to live with meaning. Try to identify 3 things that you could tangibly say, all right, these things I'm deficient in. I would like to accumulate tools about being successful, and hopefully we'll be able to give you those tools and the necessary confidence to attack those deficiencies and really become more successful. All right? I'll give you guys a few moments to put those down. You got it? Perfect. Okay. All right. So we have now at least a somewhat outline, a goal of what we want to do. We have now something we're thinking about. All right, I want to fix that. I want to become more successful in that area. I, for myself, chose something in this course to feel more successful with. I feel like I had to go on this journey with you personally and add an idea for myself of like, wow, I can get better at that. And I chose 3 as well. And I hope to let you guys know when the course is over. Hopefully one I could make public and talk about how I used the resources that I presented to you guys and used it actually myself and found some growth there. So I'm excited to do that as well. And now that we're all on this journey together, let's do our first little exercise to really get us ready for this course and just to open your mind to this topic of success and why it's such an important one. Our first exercise is think in your mind, close your eyes and think in your mind, what would make a successful day? What would make today a success? It could be anything, but think about something today that you feel like, oh, today's a successful day. If today's too difficult because of elections, think about tomorrow. What would make your day tomorrow successful? All right? Let's bring it back down. So we have an idea, a day, something that would make my day successful. Now back up a little bit and think about kind of once again, take in, I have a daily idea, I want to be successful, whatever I chose. Now, what would you consider a successful life? All right, you like exhale, like, man, that's a lot more than a successful day.
From one day to
right,
2 years.
right, a little more for than you just said a day. Well, it's important to recognize that when you think about having a successful life, it really has nothing to do with a successful day for most people.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, I aim to bridge that gap tonight. That is my goal, to bridge the excitement for a successful day towards the meaning of a successful life. And that's our goal tonight, to give a little more meaning and understanding towards that. To my online audience, you will receive about 30 minutes of this dialogue, and then we will go offline and we will go into the book and do that with the students and the people and continue the discussion here. So in the next couple of weeks, if you want to join us, please let me know and we'll have you over and we will be able to continue the lesson together. If you have any questions or comments while I'm online, feel free to write them in and we will address them as best as possible. Okay? So we want to connect these two, a daily success and a life success. About 10 years ago, when I was still fairly new to the Bay Area, I got a call from somebody about doing a funeral for somebody I'd never met. And the reason why they called was because they didn't have any rabbis in their life and they met somebody who knew me and they said, maybe call him, maybe he'll do the funeral. So it was very awkward because it was actually the first time I was ever doing a funeral on my own with no assistants and no other rabbis and didn't know the person. So it's a pretty big deal. And I went down to the house, to the house of the deceased, and I met his children, and I ended up meeting brothers and sisters and family members, and with each person I asked them if they could share something about the person who just passed, because if I'm going to do the funeral, I'd like to know who this person was. And after speaking to a couple of dozen people and then going to do the funeral, something struck me tremendously deep. This person wasn't a religious person. This person wasn't a successful, quote, business person. He wasn't technically even a successful relationship person. Okay? Lots of flaws, lots of deficiencies. But yet, time again, each person I said, what was this person like? They said, well, he wasn't the greatest person on earth, but I'll tell you, man, always looked forward to seeing him. He always made me smile. He always shared a good word. And that was from a couple of dozen people. Everybody kept on getting back to. And I was like, wow, nobody spoke about his success or lack thereof. Nobody spoke about his assets or lack thereof. Nobody even spoke about the failed relationships. All they spoke about was, the reality is this person left me always feeling better about myself. And I said, wow, this person sounds like a success. I don't know who this is, but that sounds amazing to me. Because the idea that somebody could live their whole life and what's left is, that person always made me feel better about myself, I wish I knew more people like that. So here I was getting to meet him without getting to meet him, but I was left with the best feeling of all. It also ended up being that his funeral was on my birthday. And even though maybe your birthday for some people is about partying, it was at that moment that I decided that the feeling of feeling like I was doing something good for somebody who was good, wow, that was a moment. Like, that's what I wanted. That is my inkling of what people need to start thinking of if they really want to have success. And to give you a little deeper concept, we'll read a text by the columnist and author David Brooks. He writes op-eds in the New York Times, and as well as he wrote the book called The Road to Character. And in the book Road to Character, I'd like to read an excerpt for you over here. It's on page 5 in your books. All right? And he writes like this. Recently, I've been thinking about the difference between the resume virtues and the eulogy virtues. The resume virtues are the ones you list on your resume, the skills that you bring to the job market, and that contribute to external success. The eulogy virtues are deeper. They're the virtues that get talked about at your funeral, the ones that exist at the core of your being. Whether you are kind, brave, honest, or faithful, what kind of relationships you formed, most of us would say that the eulogy virtues are more important than the resume virtues. But I confess, for long stretches of my life, I've spent more time thinking about the latter than the former. Our educational system is certainly oriented around resume virtues more than eulogy ones. Public conversation is too. The self-help tips in magazines, nonfiction bestsellers, most of us have clear strategies for how to achieve career success more than we have for how to develop a profound character. I thought this was an amazing way to sum up the biggest problem with making achievements in your career, or let's call it in smaller things, success versus what kind of person am I? What kind of things do I project in the way I live my life? So we're trying to make the case, and we're clearly not hiding it, that being successful as an individual cannot be the sum of your career, or for that matter, what we're calling your resume. But success is defined by the kind of person you are. So how does a person really tap into the kind of person they're supposed to be? How do they really identify the kind of core principles and values that make them them, and that they're able to be successful and really tap into this idea? So even if a day happens that all the things I tried to do did not work out, but when I turn around and I say, well, I was able to be me, and I was able to keep to the kind of person I look in the mirror to and say, that's the person I want to be, how do we learn to identify that person we want to see? And how do we learn to create that as the form of our existence and make that a core bedrock foundation of the kind of person I want to be? That is what we're going to talk about tonight and in the upcoming weeks. Any comments or questions to address? Okay. This idea of your resume, or for that matter, your career / physical output versus your values and core principles of the kind of person you are very much competing interests. They're not just hypotheses about concepts, about value, about measurement. They're actually competing because more often than not, I'm choosing to take a path in my career that identifies other needs. Here's the example. When you wake up in the morning, very often you have an alarm clock. You need an alarm clock for because you love the sound of an alarm? Not the case. It's because you need to get up. What do you need to get up for? Well, you need to get up so you can have coffee, of course. At least in my case, I can get up. If I don't get up, how am I going to have coffee? And I love my coffee. But why do I need my coffee? Well, it tastes good, but it's also become part of my morning ritual of getting my full operational self. Well, what's my full operational self for? Well, it's I can go do the work that I'm here to do and complete the jobs that I have and the tasks that I have in front of me. Well, why do I need to do the tasks and the jobs that I have in front of me? Well, I need to make a living. Or let's say in Paris' case, I may as well talk about myself in the third person, of course. It stings less, smells less. And what does it mean? What am I doing this for? Well, I want to live up to my job description, which is to build a great family and a great community and really tap into my core value of my life is about contribution instead of it being about consumption. So when I hit that alarm clock, though, that's not what I'm thinking about. If I'm lucky, by the time I get my coffee, I'm already thinking about it. But the idea is how often do we make that correlation between getting up in the morning? How long does it take before we tap into, I'm waking up for my job, but my job is really to nurture, what is that? What is that core self? What am I really after? Am I living the life I'm supposed to? Am I really getting to the core of who I need to be? The problem is these questions arise while people are working and while people are having success. And then all of a sudden they just can't feel the joy. It's just not enough. They have a great relationship and it's just not hitting the spot. They feel like they're living a good life and they're just not there. Why not? Well, it's because success is being measured by the resume instead of by the eulogy. And I don't want to use the word eulogy anymore tonight. But we need to learn how to measure life. In other words, the real reason you're alive and what you're really about, if we want to really understand what the concept of success is. To me, one of the most beautiful things that I got to study as a young man until today is Hasidic philosophy. When most people think of Jewish mysticism or philosophy, they can't even imagine what they're going to find if they're there. And sometimes I'll tell them things like, oh, you want to know what mysticism is? How about a month on the topic of will? And you're like, will? What do you mean will? My desire. Well, there's a difference between will and desire. Tonight we're going to use them interchangeably a little bit. But what is this? What does it mean to have a will? What does it mean to have a desire? So in Hasidic philosophy, it spends a lot of time discussing the outer will versus the inner will. The outer will is sort of like career values or material success or temporary excitement. And inner will is, simply put, why am I here? What am I about? How do I live up to the kind of person I want to be? So this is not a small discussion anymore. Now this is a wide gap of ideas that people need to start thinking about. What is my outer will and what is my inner will? Why do these things really matter? Because fundamentally, the real difference between outer will and inner will is outer will is, to a certain degree, surface level. Inner will is what we're calling deep. But the deeper your inner will, the more abstract it is. So let's say somebody says, I really just want to live my life and contribute to making the world better than when I left it. That's abstract, right? It's an abstract concept. I want to make the world better than when I was here. Very noble. You hear people talk like that. Like if I could just make the world, but does that actually go all the way up to their outer will? Does it ever actually reach that point where everything that they do on their outside reflects that inside?
You say that only when you don't know exactly what you're going to do.
We're not going to judge people anymore on these ideas. You make a very valid point. all over the Bay Area, you hear very lofty concepts. You look at all the startups, they have really lofty goals, right? They're so lofty, they're so out there, it's hard to bring it back to reality. But understand that at your deepest, most inner self, you have a desire and a will to do things that are way above and beyond your daily activity, your daily routine. And in fact, they're so deep that they become abstract and it's hard to identify what that is. Unfortunately, because of that, people stop thinking about it. In reality, though, you got to think about your real deep will. What do I really want for this world? There are ultimately, the biggest difference between outer will and inner will is inner will, it only usually takes a couple of words. Make the world a better place. Be a good person. Try to help other people. It's usually short sentences. And outer will just changes all the time. I want a nice car. It's going to be better for my transportation. I want to lose weight. Those are outer will ideas. Inner will ideas. So this is we're still uncovering the layers over here. So another idea is your inner will really doesn't change much, if at all. Your outer will changes all the time. Okay, so we're building a pattern of what outer will is and inner will is. And let's read a little bit of text over here, text number 3 on page 6, to bring this together. This is a piece of Hasidic philosophy and mysticism. It goes like this. Within the faculty of will, there are 2 dimensions, outer will and inner will. Outer will is defined as a desire that exists for another, ulterior purpose, such that one wants something not for the thing itself, but for some other purpose. Take someone who is interested in a particular business dealing for its potential profit. The latter is the ulterior motive, and it is only on account of it that he or she is interested in the business matter. So it is with a desire that is motivated by love and kindness, by harshness and anger, or by pride and determination. It is because one's love another and desires to be kind to him or her that one desires to be a particular thing. Or conversely, one's actions are motivated by severity, pride, determination, etc. In all these instances, the outer will is not essential. One does not desire the action for its own sake, but for some other reason. Back to our analogy. You don't desire the alarm clock because you like the beeping sound in the morning. You desire it for another purpose. So another layer of outer will and inner will is, outer will are things that are kind of connected to something else. I desire that because of that. I want a better car than the one I have because it's going to give me that status. Or I want to look a certain way so I could feel a certain way. I want to eat that so I could be that. I want to eat kale so I could fit into my skinny jeans. You know what I mean? Like, outer will is one thing that leads to another thing. Inner will is not like that at all. Inner will is a thing on its own. I want the world to be better. It's an inner expression that now you may say I have to do X, Y, and Z in order to do it. But the will is for only one thing. So it's completely the other way around. Now, I love this concept because I really think everybody has to start thinking about, on a personal level, what are outer will things and what are inner will things? What are things that drive me on the external? And what is that inner will that I have? What is that deep will within me that drives me? Yeah.
I have a question. So,
sure.
Let's say can I say that inner will is getting money and then outer will is getting money by investing into business, or it's not? There is completely different subject.
I think that's a very interesting thing. Is inner will to make money? I would have to say that chances are that inner will can't necessarily be to make money, because making money is for something else. Okay? So the deeper, let's put it this way, the deeper the inner will is, the more it's going to be validated as its own idea. The more it's going to be structured as its own concept worth pursuing.
Can you give an example of inner will?
I gave an example of myself as an inner will to be somebody who is a contributor in all areas instead of a consumer in areas. And I don't think inner will necessarily is where true independence is, right? I think your independent self is the expression that you have, and the way you go about things is where real individualism arises. Your inner will is usually something that, like, in theory I would work on it, but it's not there.
It feels that the outer will can be like a sequence of outer wills, which in the end gonna, like, if you're gonna dig deep enough, you're gonna get into inner will. Like, let's say I want to invest in the business so I could get money, so I can get better house, so I can have my kids have a better house and a better life, and that's like an inner will, right?
Well, the inner will is definitely about I have a deep desire to give my children the best life possible, and you make a lot of moves like that. What is our problem and why we're having this topic tonight is because here are people are saying, I am working really hard in order to give my children or family the best life, but then they're never home because they're always working. So who says the best life, if that's what your inner will is, who says that the outer tool is supposed to be working? Maybe it's being home with your children.
So the problem is not focusing on the inner will, it's focusing more on outer wills.
Yeah, I think we need a good story and a great example to understand this. This is what I got, okay? Here it is. So there was a Hasidic Jewish individual named Reb Mendel Futterfass, okay? You don't have to remember his name, it's cool. Mendel Futterfass is a friend of my grandfather's. We have a photo of him on a wall in the other room because somebody locally in the Bay Area, Gedalia Ben Aaron Olav Shalom, who was a good friend of ours, took the photo of this man, Reb Mendel Futterfass, in Berkeley. Reb Mendel Futterfass, by the time he got in Berkeley, was an old man. But earlier in his life, he was sent to the Russian labor camps for counter-revolutionary activities, aka keeping the Jewish flame alive in Russia in the communist rule. So he has all these great little stories that he took with him after being 10 years in the Gulag and getting out and going to England and rebuilding his life, and then to America to connect with his Rebbe, the Chabad Rebbe. So Reb Mendel Futterfass is an interesting dude. So this story, I really think, really expresses inner will and outer will and is perfect for what we're talking about. Reb Mendel is sitting around with other people who are, some were doctors, lawyers, writers. Wasn't all just criminals over there, right? Whoever was called out for being a counter-revolutionary individual was sent away, and often for life. And sitting next to him is a doctor, and he says, sitting around here in this room, there's a scientist, there's a writer, I'm a doctor. We're really depressed. How are you so happy? So he says, I don't understand. I'll ask you the question. Why are you depressed? I said, what do you mean? Because as a doctor, I can't be a doctor here, so I'm depressed. He's a scientist. He can't be a scientist there. He's depressed. He's a writer. He can't write here. How are you happy? Clearly, you have nothing to do. He says, well, I had a life. I had a family and a wife and a Rebbe, and I had a community and a business. However, that is not who I am. My inner will is to be somebody who serves God. I'm a Jewish person, and I see somebody who's Jewish as somebody who taps into godliness in every scenario. And yes, my quality of life is less now, but my ability to tap into who I am, my inner will is still expressed. Now you're a doctor. You can't be a doctor in the conventional sense, but the inner will of a doctor is not just the act of being a doctor, it's being able to help. And being able to help another individual in a certain way that takes a certain expertise. And I'm sure if you look around the jail, you will still have the opportunity to fulfill your inner will. And the scientist over there, yes, he doesn't have a lab, but he can still explore and discover if that's his inner will. And the writer needs to convey ideas and messages. He can still go around to the inmates and convey ideas and messages and tap into his inner will. This story to me is mesmerizing because what it says is anything physical is merely that. Your inner will is connected to a much bigger idea and a much bigger project. And this is the real concept that we're talking about tonight. To be successful, one has to be reliant on something way deeper than on physical attributes. You can have a great job for today and hopefully a better job tomorrow. You can have one level of life today and another level of life the next day. If the yin and yangs of the world, and for that matter, the yin and yangs of your day-to-day life are what constitutes success, it will be fleeting and, technically speaking, not real. In Jewish tradition, success is stability of something. And that something is your inner will. And in order to be a successful person, you have to learn how to align your inner will and your outer will. That's the big idea tonight. How do I learn to align my innermost self with my outer expression and what I'm doing? How do I inch ever so closely and ever so refined my inner true desire of what I'd like to accomplish in this world and the job that I currently have and the relationship that I currently have? How do I learn to align it just a little more? There's a fascinating idea in the Torah, and that is that only one person in the whole Torah is called successful. That person is Joseph. Yosef is called Ish Matzliach, a successful guy. The only one. When you look at his story, it's actually pretty miserable. The circumstances are terrible. It goes from bad to worse. From childhood, he gets sold down the river from his brothers. In Egypt, he becomes a slave. From slavery, you think that's the worst, he becomes incarcerated. And yet, somehow, he maintains this incredible character. The Torah describes him as happy and positive. And he goes all the way from the bottom, all the way to the top to being the viceroy of Egypt and saving Egypt, the most powerful country at the time, from famine and starvation. And he's the same Joseph. So much later that when the brothers finally get to meet him and his father sees him, that Rashi goes out to make a comment that they saw Joseph. Why does it keep on repeating they saw Joseph? It's because they saw that the same Joseph that as a kid who was happy and content and inquisitive and curious was still the same guy here all these years later, no matter what he went through. And the secret was that Joseph had an inner vision and purpose and meaning and will. And that was to live the legacy of his father. He wanted to live up to the morals and ethics of who his legacy was as a grandchild of Abraham, the first Jew. And therefore, no matter what happened to him in his life, he still felt confident that he could do that. I'm a slave. I'm going to be the most moral and ethical slave ever, and I'm going to make this the best opportunity to show my value. He became a commissioner. He grew into viceroy. He's still the same. How do I bring my legacy, my value to the table and bring the best possible foot forward? The Jewish secret to life and a successful life, and the Jewish people are successful, especially in the big picture, truly successful, is when we live to our core value and what we're calling inner will, pnimius. Pnimius means your innermost energy. And that's what really drives us. So to each and every one of you this evening, I don't know if there's any questions or comments online that I need to address before, but to each and every one of you this evening, thanks for tuning in. We're going to continue with some texts and tools. I'm sorry we can't do it all for you tonight. You're welcome to join us next week online for a little session and once again in the flesh. And we hope to inch closer your inner desires, uncover what your inner will really is, and give you the opportunity to connect it to your outer will and desires. And may God bless you with a great week ahead. L'chaim, l'chaim.